Super Gulp Part 2.
Top 10.
Top 10 comes with the first entry on the list of an Avengers, a true Avengers film. Avengers Age of Ultron at number 10 for me. I think this is still a really fun movie. I think the humor comes through. There's that great party scene is really funny.
That's awesome.
They're all trying to pick up Thor's hammer and stuff. That introduction of the Ultron character is handled so creepy in that scene when the robots come out and it's all falling apart and the voice and everything. James Spader does such a good job voicing the Ultron character. So there are elements to this movie that I really enjoy. Some great action set pieces in the movie. But it's the weakest of the Avengers films where you have everybody together. It does seem like Joss Whedon was being pulled in too many different directions at that point by the studio, and it really shows in the film. There's an element of this film that also feels like it's spinning its wheels that I feel Civil War has. They come in the middle of all this stuff. It's a really entertaining movie. You've got all the characters you love that are so much more fleshed out at this point, and really, if you're gonna love them, you're gonna love them, or if you're not, they're never gonna win you over. I find it a very entertaining movie, a rewatchable movie, but the weakest in the actual overall Avengers timeline. So at number 10.
Coming in at number 10 for me, this is where things start to get strange. Doctor Strange, one of the movies I was anticipating a lot to eventually get made. I love that they got, I think his name is Scott Derrickson, who is a horror director. Didn't really bring too much of those elements into this movie, but he made it so... still possibly the coolest looking movie out of all of them. I love the look of this movie. I love the tone of this movie. Sometimes going with the obvious casting choice is the best way to go. And now that could I have seen Ethan Hawke in this role? Maybe. But now that we have Benedict Cumberbatch, he is so perfect. Benedict Wong is awesome in this. The cape is so great in this movie. I rewatched this movie recently and I just love it. I love Doctor Strange. I do feel when a lot of people talk about bad villains, one of the things we also talk about is bad or otherwise unnecessary love interests. And I think this one is probably right next to Natalie Portman, as in we don't need her. Rachel McAdams is fine in the movie. She just literally has nothing to do with the story. It shouldn't be one of those movies that you find so entertaining because it's mystic arts and it's... it's a lot of exposition and stuff, but it's exposition that works because it's told through this really great kaleidoscopy kind of filter. It's some of the camera tricks and some of the CGI tricks that they use in this movie to kind of bring the story out, so we as viewers know what it feels like to get into what's going on with the character and what he's visualizing. All the same kind of stuff that you see in the comic books. I just thought Derrickson did a great job. I thought he was a good choice to direct it. So Doctor Strange is starting my top 10 at number 10.
Take everything Ben just said about Doctor Strange and apply that to my number 9 film, which is Doctor Strange. Yeah, I agree with everything you said. It is the most awesome visual feast of the MCU, I've got to say. I mean, those special effects are amazing and awesome. I'm actually really looking forward to a Doctor Strange 2 to see a bit more of that, to see Derrickson get another opportunity to wow us with some of that.
Wish it wasn't so far away.
This deep into the MCU, still getting an origin story that entertains you and seems somewhat fresh, handled slightly different than every other one. Doctor Strange is such a great addition to the MCU in terms of his character and being played by Benedict Cumberbatch. And so I loved Doctor Strange in Infinity War. I mean, he was one of the standouts in that movie. So he's just a character that seems to really be growing on me from film to film. And I think it'd be great to see him back in his original director's hands and have a really great sequel. It was really great to have Doctor Strange come out and be such a great film to introduce all these new elements and make them work within what we've already seen in the MCU.
Number 9 for me is Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2. I still like it a lot. I still love the franchise of Guardians of the Galaxy. I remember we reviewed this movie, check that out, a couple years ago when it came out, and I had said, I don't really care if they ever mix them in with the rest of the MCU because I like this franchise for what it is. I like the new characters they were adding. They fit within that group of misfits. You learn a lot more about Peter Quill. This was really sort of Peter Quill's... The first one was more of an origin story for the group. The second one feels like it was a Peter Quill story, learning everything that you needed to know and finding out vital information about who he is. And Kurt Russell makes everything he's in better. He was awesome in it. Perfect fit for him to play Star-Lord's dad. I loved it. Michael Rooker got so much more to do. He was great. All the original 5 were always great. They split them up a little bit in this movie, which made it more fun. They had their own little adventures to go on. It's such a solid part 2. It's not as good as the first one to me. I didn't like the soundtrack nearly as much. That was my biggest knock on it when we did the review. It's just not as inspired as the first one, but I get it. That's tough to do. It's Volume 2, after all. That's where they put the B-sides and the shitty ones.
The first Avenger, Captain America, the first Avenger, coming in at number 8 for me.
We are way on the opposite side.
Yeah, that's the one that stands out from the list so far that I have much higher than you.
Yeah.
I still really like this movie. I mean, I haven't seen it in a long time. Maybe with all these new entries, maybe I would agree that it should drop down a little bit. But what I always remember about it is we really are meeting the heart of the MCU in Steve Rogers' character. I've just been impressed with the evolution of Steve Rogers and Captain America through these films to keep me interested in what seems like one of the most bland superheroes on paper, I guess. I love the period piece setting. It works really well for me. As you point out, Joe Johnston brings a lot in terms of his Rocketeer elements that he made that film so great, and it really stands out in this movie too. I love the kind of Indiana Jones influenced elements in this film. The villain is great in my opinion. I think one of the best villains overall is Red Skull, and Hugo Weaving playing him. So there's just a lot that worked for me in this movie. I think the progression of seeing Chris Evans playing Steve Rogers before he has the serum, it's all very believable. I think the effects are very believable. The character really comes through in those early stages before he's the super soldier. So it's a very distinct film in the MCU, in my opinion, of the period piece being a great origin story for one of the characters that has evolved to be one of my favorites. And I think it's got 2 of the best action scenes in the MCU as well. I love the initial action scene of Steve Rogers chasing down the assassin, and the way that plays into the evolution of his character just all in that scene, him using the door as a shield and things like that, and just seeing him not even understanding his powers, but learning them in that first scene.
He runs through that building.
I think that scene is just handled really well, and then the final action scene I think is really handled well. The zero gravity elements of them flying around in that ship and being tossed around. I think it's kind of a short scene, but I find it very exciting within the MCU's action.
So my number 8 is Avengers: Age of Ultron. It's a fun movie. I agree with you. It's the weakest of the Avengers. That's not to say it's a bad thing. I love a lot of the stuff they do with this movie. I love that it shows the team working together on separate adventure at the beginning. That isn't necessarily the adventure they go on later, even though it's not really explained how they all got back together again for it. It's just supposed to be kind of suggested that they've been back together working on things for a little bit here and there. The biggest problem with this movie is it kind of repeats the entire third act of the first one, which is just a big, giant fight with nameless, faceless robots instead of aliens. Plays out in a lot of similar beats, but you do see a lot of superheroes saving people, which is kind of cool. There's a lot. You were talking about action scenes. I love the middle action scene in this one, where it's just Black Widow, Cap, and Hawkeye that go out to China on that mission to get like the cradle thing, and they have this really great Captain America has a really great fight with Ultron on all these cars, and you got Hawkeye flying through the air in the Quinjet, and then Black Widow trying to keep up with them on the motorcycle. It's such an awesome action scene. Like, it's got 5 or 6 different things going on that are just trying to set up other things. But hello, that's what the big team-up movies are all about. They're showing all that stuff that you're going to see in future movies. Maybe this one did a little bit too much, so that's why it's the least of the Avengers movies so far. But there's so much fun that we have with this movie. I didn't mind it that it's long. This movie doesn't get enough credit. I think people think it was like the first misstep, and I don't really find it a misstep. I thought it was a natural progression. It's the first time you've ever had a sequel to a team-up movie that was in itself a sequel to all these other movies, and then to do that again, to me, it just made sense. I don't know what people were expecting, but Age of Ultron.
Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2. I love the Guardians of the Galaxy movies. Both of them are excellent. I think that it's one of the best casts in the MCU. Just all the characters that have been introduced over the 2 Guardians of the Galaxy movies, they work so well together. The chemistry on screen works so well. I still find it to be right up there with the first film. It's just super entertaining. I don't think James Gunn is the strongest action director. I've had that issue with most of the MCU. I think that there's issues with some of the directing of the action. It's exciting, it's entertaining, but it's not as kinetic or visceral as I want to get my blood going in every film. But it's certainly serviceable in this movie. It's entertaining. I really love me some Guardians of the Galaxy. Volume 2 is great. We'll see where Volume 1 lands on the list.
Okay, my number 7, this is one I have far ahead of yours, and that is Spider-Man Homecoming. This is John Hughes without the sexist, racist dialogue, and this is really a story about Peter Parker figuring out where Spider-Man's worth comes in this new MCU. Where is he best placed as a superhero? And I like that you have Tony Stark coming in as sort of a mentor, and I like the decision to go with someone, a villain who's very grounded and very sympathetic, like Michael Keaton as the Vulture, because he's just a working man who was screwed over by the Avengers, and he's basically what you love about the original foundation of Spider-Man villains is they're just robbers. I love that they don't kill off the villain. I love it. I love that they don't kill off the villain, because he doesn't even necessarily deserve to die. Like, he's the only people he's really killed in the movie are like other thugs or whatever. As far as how Spider-Man should be treated in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, I don't see how they possibly could have made it better. And Tom Holland, to me, is everything Spider-Man is supposed to be. Love Spider-Man Homecoming. It's so good to see them doing Spider-Man in the MCU, and I can't wait for the next one. So that's it for me.
So that brings us to number 6 for me, which is the original Guardians of the Galaxy. For all the reasons that I loved Part 2, I love Part 1 just that much more. Star-Lord, such an excellent character. Probably my second favorite in all of the MCU behind Tony Stark. One of the funniest casts in the MCU. The chemistry plays off of each other so well. Yeah, it's just a really fun film. It's rewatchable, so rewatchable that anytime you pop it on, you just want to get through the whole thing and not turn it off. Star-Lord is such a fun character, maybe the second best after Tony Stark, in my opinion, in all of the MCU, in just terms of entertaining, compelling to know more about his backstory.
Coming in at number 6 for me is Guardians of the Galaxy as well. I love the charisma, I love the charm, I love the magic. This is a very rewatchable movie. This is one of those MCU movies because of the adventure and the space and the characters. It's so easy to just pop it on, go back to it. Totally made Pratt a superstar. Zoe Saldana had already kind of been coloring her body different colors in other movies, but she's excellent in these movies. I love Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 1. Love the soundtrack. It's basically just a soundtrack of Dazed and Confused, but that's fine. It's a great movie. These are what our Avenger heroes are doing when they're not saving the world.